thank you everyone for giving of your time today. I've got 20 minutes to try and cram in a message that I think is important for all of us in the context, especially of the very well delivered presentation of the fund manager just before me. And what I'm going to do is talk about three things and concentrate on one of those three things. I'm going to talk a little bit about deep science in Europe and deep science in the world and how these things are incredibly important as part of the ecosystem for the next generation. I am going to talk a little bit about quantum, and then I'm going to focus on AI. And I'm going to focus on what the next generation of AI and the generation after that looks like. Those of you that are old enough will remember what the first mobile telephone looked like at the end of the 1980s, and you may compare that with the thing that you carry about in your pockets. Well, the likelihood is that you can also think about the change in the Model T Ford to today's Tesla. Those are indicators of what happens between the first generation of something which is going to revolutionize our lives and the way that we think about living our lives and the way that we plan for ourselves and our children, our families, our communities, and our societies, and what happens afterwards. And AI is really no different. Whatever we might think of ChatGPT, and it is very important, and it is revolutionary, and it has brought to our attention something which Alan Turing thought about 70 years ago, human-like intelligence in a machine. It really doesn't bear very much resemblance to what will be artificial intelligence over the course of the next few years. So the first slide, I'm going to gallop through these next few slides, I'm afraid, just on the basis of the timing. We were established in Cambridge. I, at the time, was the chairman of the Stephen Hawking Foundation. I also had founded something called Accelerate Cambridge, which was for the benefit of the university, looking at deep science companies, which in the United Kingdom have historically not done very well. They get started and they don't get very far. And a confluence of various different circumstances, including the establishment of the United Kingdom's Quantum Technologies Program, led to the foundation of Cambridge Quantum. And a few years later, we were invested in by IBM and Honeywell, and more recently, we've raised our first external capital from some of our users. We have not raised a single penny of money from any venture capital fund whatsoever. We've raised about 1.6 billion in total, and we've spent about 1.1 billion. We've got about 500 million in the bank. So that's a quick note on this. Let's move on to the stuff that really matters. I'll give you a comment on what Quantinuum is. As an organization, we are the world's largest quantum computing company. For those of you who have some semblance of affinity to the success of the United Kingdom, and I do, I fly the flag all the time, we are the leading economy in the world in what is the most important industrial revolution in the world, and you don't need to take my word for this. There has never been a time when nation states have programs around one technology. Every economy of consequence, from China, Japan, the United Kingdom, the United States, Germany, has a quantum program. You should know this. And the reason they have a quantum program is that this is not a disruptive technology. This is an industrial revolution. It's as important as a spinning jenny was, or the steam engines were, or automobiles were, perhaps even more important than transistors in the 60s on silicon. So most countries around the world have quantum programs, and we are the largest quantum computing company in the world, and we are a British company, and the British are leaders in this technology. So it's very interesting that that particular circumstance has arisen. I'm going to skip this slide, and I'm going to concentrate on the impact of quantum on AI. And in the aftermath of the gentleman that spoke before me, I think this may be a nice degree of continuity. I'm not going to dig too deep, but I'm going to draw on some fairly long threads there. This slide in itself actually describes the structure of our company. We are at the bottom of the stack, a hardware company. We have computers. Yes, quantum computers do exist. We have the world's first operating system for quantum computers, the equivalent of DOS, for those of you who remember your computer history. We have something called Ticket, which has gone viral. It's a software development kit with 30 or 40 million users all over the world. It's an open source platform. And then the application stack is above that. The first thing that's commercial is cybersecurity. We generate keys that are non-deterministic. For those of you who are interested in this, you should be aware that over the next 3, possibly 4 years, all keys will be non-deterministic. That means they're not algorithmically derived, and that obviously is something that people in cybersecurity have been looking forward to for as long as carrier pigeons have carried messages. When you have a code that determines through an algorithm what your key is, you are therefore becoming vulnerable to attack. Non-deterministic keys draw their entropy or randomness from the universe. That's a whole lecture in itself about the Bell test, but we won't go there. It is maximally random. What I'm going to now focus on is one of the areas that we focus on, which is AI. And I'm going to start by just reminding you that nothing happens overnight. The slide here is a potted history of what's happened over the last 10 years. In fact, a very good friend of mine, a guy called Demis Hassabis, who founded DeepMind, was instrumental in the United Kingdom for creating something called the transformer. The person who invented and built the transformer now works for us. And a quantum transformer will be the thing that triggers this next iteration. Just remember, if you remember nothing else from this, that we're probably less than 2 years away from that. And then the impact of that is pretty remarkable ahead of us. So what's the reason why this is necessary? The reason why this is necessary is that all models, all LLM models, and many other deep learning models are a black box. You get a result, and you cannot validate why that result was given. You can often guess because the result might be right. You might say, well, what was the full name of somebody that is famous, let's say John F. Kennedy? What did the F stand for? And you'll get an answer, and you can validate that if he tells you it's Frank, then he was wrong. But you don't know why it was wrong. You can also validate when it's right. You might say, what's the capital of France? And they'll say Paris, and you don't need to check anymore. The problem, however, is that it is a black box. You can only validate at the end whether it was right or wrong. However, it is not in the interests of the system or the establishment to tell us that. They are in the business of selling things over a cloud. And this is very powerful. Most of these technologies are consumer-facing. The chart that the Polar guy gave you, which is interesting, is only half the story, because most of the value that's been derived over the course of the last 25 years is in consumer-facing AI. Now, that's all well and good. We also are told about many different things that AI represents, and these are some of the things that people are talking about on the catalysmic side. I am not a believer in this. I believe that we will be able to use these technologies for the good of humanity. However, the point here is that there are conjectures which are unproven, which take over the headlines. All of this is normal. Those of us who are old enough will remember what happened when the internet started coming on board. And there is no reason for us to take either extreme because, and this is the classic dialogue that we're entered into, whether we know it or not, we're moving towards some sort of consciousness which is embedded in a machine. And this thing called AGI, the one in the middle, is what we are told. This is a slide from OpenAI. That's where we're at now. Well, we're not. They're not human-like. This, by the way, is part of the narrative. Many people here may believe this. Many of you may not know why you believe it. Maybe it's intuitive. But these things have been discussed for over 70 years. A famous paper by Turing, which is very well worth reading, is Computational Intelligence, I think it's called. It's 1951. And his good friend, or maybe not so good friend, but his academic colleague Gödel, who died many years later, also talked about these things. We understand what the limits of computation are. And Turing's imitation test, the thing that he talked about when he said we might not be able to understand or distinguish between a computer and a human being was actually meant to be, can we be conned by a machine into telling us that it is a human being? Now, that last bit is really interesting. When we go on to OpenAI and we ask it a question, it might give us an hallucination, and we might believe the hallucination, but do we think that it's human-like? The issue isn't whether we think it, it's what everybody else thinks, and how we act upon that information. And the conjecture that has been made is that in order for us to move to that next generation of AI that is accountable, that is interpretable, and we know that it's not a black box, requires a technology that is not currently possible using classical computers. No matter how many trillions of dollars worth of GPUs we concatenate together, we will not be able to make a human-like language processing model. It is not possible. We can get close to the edge and we can make lots of mistakes. It will always be a black box. So in medicine and in finance and in the legal industries, and particularly in consumer-facing industries, we need accountability. Now, at this point, I'm going to make one statement before I move on to how quantum will impact AI, by saying that 30 years ago, we were asleep at the wheel. My generation let everybody down. That is why large platforms on the internet can get away with causing young people to harm themselves or causing various kinds of phobia and not get taken to account for it. Well, this next generation will not be like that because we will hold them to account. And luckily, the generation that's in charge now and will be in charge going forward of developing these technologies will not stand for this bullshit. And that is why I'm very, very, very optimistic that an accountable system is one that will be utilized. And that is what will come into place because a quantum computing paradigm allows us to think about getting to that stage. This is a slide that I'm actually going to skip. And I'm going to go here. Now, don't worry about all the words on this. This is the 2-year journey that I'm referring to. A large language model or an AI system available to solve Alzheimer's. Right? So you ask a system, or actually, let's talk about carbon sequestration. So we as a society, we as a world, have struggled for 40 years to find any way in which we can successfully and safely sequester carbon from our atmosphere. It is highly likely that the algorithm to do this has already been created, and it is more than likely that within 2 to 3 years we will have that material. But the idea that you could have a code LLM, so this is a code writing large language model, it's a particular type, which is, by the way, self-coding. For those of you who are interested in that, I don't have the time to talk about it, but I will hang around afterwards. This means that we're human-like. We're not dependent upon subsidiary programs to correct our errors. We correct them at the source code level, which is the holy grail for compute. But if you have a self-coding LLM that is given something in natural language, human-like language, a Hamiltonian, don't worry about what that is. It just means the underlying way of finding the ground state of a molecule, which is how and why all new materials are discovered, whether they be pharmaceuticals or code for carbon sequestration, will then be plugged into a quantum computer. This H1 and H2 you can ignore as well. It just is the latest generation of quantum computers. The most powerful quantum computer is currently in Broomfield, Colorado, and it cannot be simulated. It is a scary thing and an exciting thing to consider. It breaks the boundaries of all computation. You then get a result from that, which you then plug back into the coded LLM, and it then obviously goes forward and does better the next time until you get to the state where you have what you want. And that's the way that we've always invented things. Kitty Hawk was an approximation of what a Boeing jet is today. We do these things stochastically and heuristically till we get to them. This will all happen within a few seconds. That is how close we are. Now, this is not science fiction. These are 2 papers that we have published in the course of the last literally 3 weeks, which is one of the reasons when Jim asked me very kindly to come here today, I told him that the timing was very interesting. There's something called APS this week, Jim, in Minnesota, which is the American Physical Society conference, and we've just presented this. This will be a product in less than a year. What is this? This is the way, what was the prompt for the computer industry 40, 50 years ago? It was a transfer of transistors onto silica substrates. This is the equivalent. This is what has happened this week, and we're all alive to see it. And what will therefore happen is that we have language models that are interpretable. In 2015, it was discovered that language can be embedded. This is natural language processors. That's what LLMs are. They're natural language processing models, except when you ask them to write some sort of essay, they take up, I don't know, the equivalent of the electricity used in Reykjavik for a week to tell you what you don't really need to know. But here, we are talking about something which was discovered in 2015, which is that all language can be transmitted through a quantum circuit. A quantum circuit just means on a quantum computer. So that's me done, because I don't have very long. And I'm not going to say anything about this. I will finish by talking about one or two things that we can look forward to over the course of the next, let's say, 2, 3, or 4 years. For those of you who are interested, the UK government's programme on national quantum technologies is a fantastic resource to learn more. The US program is very, very good. They're all on the internet. They're all transparent. They're all very easy to understand. Our website has a huge amount of public information. We are open source committed. We believe that over the course of the next 20 years, the largest company in the world will be a quantum computing company. And if you figure out what that means, that's a big statement. The largest company in the world, I don't know how big it is, Aramco, maybe 7 trillion. I think that'll be dwarfed by a quantum computing company, and there's very little doubt in our mind that that company will be Quantinuum. So I'm going to stop there, and I think there are 2 or 3 moments left for questions, but I will hang around afterwards if you're interested in going any deeper, particularly on the AI side.